Well, the Frogs are 3-3. Seems like everything's going wrong. We're going to break all of that down right now on Frogs Insider. Welcome into the Frogs Insider podcast presented by the Flying T Club. I am Jamie Plunkett here as always. Melissa Treebuster's not here. She's on a European vacation, much needed, well-deserved, and probably for the best after what we saw this weekend. So in her stead, we've got former TCU offensive lineman, Super Bowl 45 champion, current NFL analyst for the DraftKings network, and he was on the radio call with Brian Estridge on Friday night, Marshall Newhouse, on the show today. Marshall, thank you so much for taking the time. I know you're crazy busy these days, man.
Yeah, man, happy to be here. Love you guys, and yeah, Melissa's pure frog heart couldn't take this past game, so I'm glad she's on vacation.
Yeah, I'm glad you're falling on the sword for her this time, man. We're going to break down everything that happened on Friday night's 30-19 loss to Houston. We're going to talk a little bit about how just more existentially the Frogs have gotten to this point. But first, got to tell you a little bit of podcast business here. We are presented by the Flying T Club, TCU's NIL collective. They support over 110 student athletes, Horned Frog athletes. You can go to flyingtclub.com, see all of the ways that you can get involved supporting TCU student athletes, and you can check out all the ways that the Flying T Club partners with organizations in and around the city of Fort Worth, connecting those organizations to TCU student athletes to do work for the greater good in and around the city of Fort Worth. Super cool organization, 501c3 nonprofit, so if you make a gift, it is tax deductible. That's always a nice little perk. And again, they are the only NIL collective for TCU, so you know that they're pulling in the same direction as the university, as the athletics department. Everybody's on the same page. They're a pretty cool organization. Again, flyingtclub.com is where you go for all of that. And as you know, if you've listened before, Frogs Insider is a part of the Republic of Football Network over at Dave Campbell's Texas Football. All you've got to do is search Republic of Football Network wherever you get your podcasts. You'll find in one stream, you'll find a show for all 13 D1 football programs in the state of Texas. Really cool feed. So if you love TCU, you'll get Frogs Insider stuff. If you want Baylor, Tech, SMU, Texas State, UTEP, Rice, obviously Texas and Texas A&M as well, all of those shows are in one feed right there at the Republic of Football Network. And if you just want TCU content, search Frogs Insider wherever you get your shows. Go to the YouTube channel. We're over 700 subscribers now, getting closer to that 1,000 subscriber mark by Halloween. Hit that subscribe button over at the YouTube channel, Frogs Insider. You'll see all of our content over there. You'll see more player interviews coming up. I've got like 7 basketball interviews lined up for the next 2 weeks. All of those will drop over at the YouTube channel. You'll see post-game press conferences. You can go join all of the people commenting on Sonny Dykes' post-game press conference from Friday. Pretty crazy, the conversations that are happening in the YouTube comments over at the Frogs Insider YouTube channel. All right, podcast business out of the way. Marshall, TCU loses to Houston 30-19. Houston's offense was the worst scoring offense in the country coming into this weekend. They dropped 30 on the Horned Frogs, their second most points scored in a single game this year, first being 33 points to Rice. They hadn't scored a point in their last 2 games before this. TCU's defense just continues to struggle in the exact same ways we've seen since you were on the call in week 1 against Stanford.
Listen, the defense, you usually can allow for a little bit of room for error with a new coordinator. Andy Avalos coming from Boise State. This is a new system. So these are guys that were acclimating to Coach Gillespie's 3-3-5. It's on a principal level, it's run in a completely different way. And so this is supposed to be a more high-profile, attacking, aggressive defense. And in spurts it has been. But before you can ever get in most of these situations to really attack, show simulated pressure, get pass rushers, athletes on the field, you've got to just do the basic thing, which is, stopping the run. And they've had a really hard time doing that. And the most alarming part is that often they're in position to stop the run. They are just losing the battles behind the line of scrimmage to make the first tackle, and then at the line of scrimmage to make the second tackle. And guys are falling forward for 3, 4, 5, 6 yards, let alone ripping out big runs, let alone what would have been tackles for loss. Then you get a team in 2nd and 12, 3rd and 12, or now 2nd and short, 3rd and short, and they can't get off the field. I mean, we're going to talk about this, but Houston just dominated time possession, not because they are, as you mentioned, a high-flying offense, but because TCU couldn't make any timely tackles to get them off the field. And Houston was in no rush. They weren't running a high tempo offense whatsoever. They had came into the game, Coach Willie Fritz wanted to, what he'd say, simplify the offense. They had Donovan Smith, who had been struggling this year. They had played Zeon Chris a little bit, but they went with Zeon Chris from the beginning in totality, which, it brings a wrinkle into things. But Zeon Chris is by far a worse passer than Donovan Smith, who is also already not a great passer, who's been struggling as a senior. So if you're the TCU defense, if anything, that's telling me there is less that we have to worry about from what this guy can do. We just need to know what they are and stop them. Zeon Chris can scramble. He's a little bit quicker than Donovan Smith. He's a big guy still. He's 6'3", 205. He can throw, but as we saw in the game, he's a one-read quarterback right now. And TCU was just I'm getting off tangent right now, but TCU was just completely okay with allowing these large cushions for him to throw these quick outs, one-read passes. And before you know it, he's 8 for 9 for 120. And so that all does play into TCU not being able to get off the field and run downs and not getting Zeon Chris. As we mentioned, his strength is not passing. You get a guy like that in 3rd and long. That's where you want to live. And you do that by stopping the run early. And TCU just, from a tackling standpoint, from an execution standpoint, wasn't getting there often enough.
They really weren't. And it was really frustrating, I think, to see over and over and over again light boxes against a mobile quarterback. You talked about it before the pod. We'll get into it a little bit later. D tackles maybe a little bit out of position in those light boxes, which just compounds the issue. And I fully agree about the soft coverage from the corners, 8, 9, 10 yards off most of the night. I would assume that against a guy who struggles to throw the football, you want to press those guys. You want to make him make more difficult passes in smaller windows. Maybe even have to push the ball further down the field at times. I don't think Houston attempted more than 2 or 3 passes beyond 10 yards all night long, and it's because TCU's coverage continued to play soft. Like you said, give them those little short outs, those quick slants over the middle, and it was. Nothing about Houston's offense was complicated. Nothing about Houston's offense was something that you hadn't seen on film yet this year.
No.
And yet TCU's defense seemed just totally content with allowing those short completions, allowing runs for 4, 5, 6 yards a clip, and then Houston obviously snapped off some big runs when they really needed to. I understand, Marshall, that this is a new scheme. I understand that this is maybe there's not everybody that Avalos wants in here from a skill set perspective yet, especially at that linebacker spot. And yet, what we've seen from TCU's defense, and this is a problem beyond just this season, has been part of a larger trend with Sonny Dykes, and we're going to get into that in a little bit. It's just really frustrating to see. On the other side of the football, though, actually, I have one more note. My mind's going everywhere.
Go for it.
Houston did exactly what Kansas should have done last week. They ran the ball 45 times. They only passed it 20. Kansas, meanwhile, I don't know what Jeff Grimes was doing, threw it 34 times and only ran it 34 times. Kansas ran the ball for 5 yards a clip. And I think if they run the ball more in certain situations, they probably come away with that win. And we're looking at a 2-4 TCU team right now instead of a 3-3 TCU team. So, credit to Houston. They came in with a very simple game plan. They executed that game plan, and defensively, TCU offered very little resistance to that game plan.
Yeah, absolutely. And I agree with you about the Kansas point too. I think they had a level of reliance on what we thought might have been a Heisman contending quarterback, and so you feel more comfortable putting the ball in his hands. But I agree. It's about adapting to the real-time context. And the real-time context is that this TCU defense can't stop a nosebleed. And so until they show me that they're going to do that regularly, I'm not going to stop running the ball. And Kansas did it. UCF did it. UCF, I think, was the big exposure of TCU felt helpless almost on defense. It felt like they didn't have an answer. Whether you bring an extra safety in the box or not, R.J. Harvey was falling forward. KJ Jefferson was falling forward for 3, 4, 5 yards. Arm tackles being missed. And so, we're trying to find that balance as far as an answer between scheme, fit, talent, fit, and then like execution of coaching tactics. And to me, wrapping up a level of like attacking and tackling technique falls on coaching tactics. Because yes, coaches always want better ammunition, aka players and talent. That's always going to be the case. But the level of your coaching acumen is what you can get out of what you have, and what you're seeing is, moments where TCU, the call is right, but if a guy dives at a running back's legs, I saw a lot. 15 missed tackles speaks for itself, but a guy like Devin Deal, who you bring in from the portal, who I was very excited about. Cooper McDonald, who you bring in from the portal, I was very excited about. Guys who are they're missing arm tackle. Running backs are breaking through their arm tackles, and you're like, you can't sustain that over the course of a game and over a season if they're getting through the first level. And then on a deeper, we'll get nerdy for the fans of the podcast, on a deeper technique level, Andy Avalos' scheme is very dependent on what we call two gapping. The defensive linemen are asked to use their arms as lever points and press and push and occupy a hole with their body, but have eyes and antennas, if you will, for where the running back might cut, and to relocate the lineman and swim, rip, get whatever you need to do to get in that hole. What you're seeing, if you watch the film, TCU's D linemen are getting washed out of their hole originally, and they're not recovering. It's one thing to get – I'm a lineman, offensive lineman. I loved hitting guys, and that initial surge was fun, but what makes a great offensive lineman is the ability to sustain a block. And what makes a good defensive lineman is the ability to recover from initially being blocked. And so when you can't recover regularly, then there's all the onus on the second level linebackers to make every play. They can't make every play, so they're getting a full steam running back at 3-4 yards. They're missing their fair share of tackles, and then you get to the next level and the next level. And so this is all encompassing failure so far in consistent, I think, gritty defensive play. And I think they're searching for, is this a technique thing? Is this just we don't have the guys thing? Yeah. But to me, the closeness of these games, these are all winnable games. I don't think TCU has played a game that they shouldn't or can't win. To me, that screams a level of lack of communication from the coach's brain and his wants to the player's execution. And somewhere in between, we're lost a little bit.
There's definitely a disconnect. In that room right now. How they can resolve it in the middle of the season. Maybe it's a good time for the bye week. They've got it this upcoming weekend. They got extra time to prepare to go up to Utah. That one could be tough.
And I asked him on the radio call at his post-game press conference about the bye week and about the missed tackles, and he made it seem like there was going to be some intentional, purposeful, physical tackling going on. And you hope that at least that triggers some guys who maybe weren't getting it before. You're not going to make up for months and months and months of technique with just a week of extra practice, but at the bare minimum, using that time to emphasize, hey, this can't go on. You hope that kind of sparks the team and sparks the defense a little bit.
Hopefully so. On the other side of the football, probably the worst passing night we've seen from this TCU offense so far this year. And I think that this is really where when you offer up a one-dimensional offense, which it's no secret TCU's offense has been incredibly one-dimensional so far this year. When you have a secondary that's capable of keeping up with your stable of wide receivers and you force Josh Hoover into tight windows, he made a couple of mistakes. But when you don't have a running game to fall back on when the passing game's not working, this is what can happen to your football team. 19 points, terrible on third down. I think they were 4 of 10 on third down. 5
At one point, 0 for 6. Couldn't do anything in the first half.
Couldn't do anything in the first half, especially on third down, finding themselves in third and long situations pretty consistently. Marshall, when you looked at this TCU offense, it puts up good scoring numbers a lot of the time. Raw yardage, it looks great on paper a lot of the time. But some of the efficiency metrics that we've seen with this offense under Kendall Briles and some of the execution mistakes that we've seen, maybe this offense isn't as good as it has been advertised when you just look at raw stats.
Yeah, I think that's a great point to make. And it's always it's gray because, you see the stats and stats sometimes tell a story, but they don't tell the whole story. And the context is, are you putting your guys in a position to win consistently? And are you converting into points ultimately? Because, we've seen plenty of, old Texas Tech offenses who can score 50, 60 and they're 6-6 at the end of the year. And so, yeah, this offense is lacking balance for sure. And I wonder, listen, they benched Cam Cook and he responded in a way. I mean, averaging over 5 yards a carry. He was running with more purpose, more intention, and I would give him respect for that. But if you see that happening and then you don't create more opportunities for that to lean on that, then what's the whole point of maybe sending a message to him? I don't get that. And then on Josh Hoover's part, he's been a pretty consistent quarterback from his decision making. That's what separated him, I think, as a quarterback in his league when he was leading the first 3 weeks in conference and passing. But the deep pass before half, forcing things, that's so uncharacteristic of him. And I just felt like he had this sense of, I've got to do something beyond myself, and that's never where you want to be. I would love to see, and I don't know where this is in Kendall Briles' playbook, but I would love to see occasionally Josh Hoover, who's a very good athlete, keep the ball and keep a team honest with as far as his pocket presence or a called run or a zone read, a keep, something like that. Because, yeah, he's basically a sitting target. And when we don't have a run game, it turns into 7-on-7. And we all know that just doesn't go well anymore. That's not good enough anymore. And so, yeah, this offense has a little bit of an identity crisis because, yeah, okay, maybe your running game is not the strength. Okay, you're a passing team. Well, if you're a passing team, why don't Savion Williams, Jack Best, and J.P. Richardson why are they not leading the league in all these categories? Because they're good enough to do it. So if you want to be one way, all right, be that way and go all in on that way. And, there's something missing, and I'll take accountability as if that's such a thing. I'm not there anymore, but the offensive line has to play better. They made a change, replacing Nichols with Ben Whiteside, with Ben Whitfield. For most part, the pass protection was good, but there were some rough looks, 3-man rushes, corner blitzes that weren't picked up that you just kind of scratch your head and you just wonder where the answers are. What autonomy does Josh Hoover have to get in better plays or to adjust on the fly? Or, the linemen, are they smart enough to pick stuff out on their own? That's from year to year. You have to know your guys, know your personnel. But where are the answers when teams don't do exactly what you think they're going to do? Because no one's going to sit there in nickel and let you just carve them up. They're going to do what Houston did. Houston, I imagine, took a lot of pages from UCF, from SMU. All these coaches that have coached with each other or have a lot of mutual connections. So if you're from week to week, if you're not adjusting and if you're not allowing your scheme to be adjustable, you end up with 19 points against one of the worst teams in the country.
I agree. Yeah, so a couple of notes. Cam Cook, like you said, actually ran the ball pretty well, 5.5 yards a carry, only had 14 carries. That's not helping your passing game with the running game. Jeremy Payne had a fantastic week against Kansas. Thought he had a breakout game. He gets 5 total touches in this football game. Probably not enough. So you've got your 2 running backs who – you need to get more involved. You need to have a more balanced offense. They totaled. Cam Cook didn't have a reception, so they had 19 touches between the 2 of them in a game where you were never really. I mean, even when it was 24-6, it was never that far. Yeah, you're not that far out of reach at that point. So you had time in the second quarter, in the third quarter, to maybe lean on the run game. The offense was leaning on the D line in that aspect. They hadn't done that to this point, really.
Which let's give Houston all the credit. Their defensive line is serious.
Yes.
We do that. I scouted them. We talked about that coming in the game on the radio broadcast. This is a serious D line that's given everyone problems. It's given Iowa State problems. It has given everyone problems. So this Oklahoma, I mean, they're no slouch, and so this was by no means a D line that was laying down. But there were still opportunities there, and that's the disappointing part. Is that, again, you were not out of this game. This offense was not going to run away from this game. I think they were probably shocked to be ahead in the way that they were. I'm sure that they were kind of shocked that TCU was, going for it on 4th and 2 with a tush push. I'm sure they were shocked that in the red zone, Josh Hoover throws back across the field the things that are characteristically that losing teams do, TCU was doing, and I'm sure Houston wasn't prepared for that necessarily.
Yeah, I agree. All right, let's talk about a couple key moments in this football game, Marshall, because there were 3 that I think stood out to me. that kind of defined the entire football game. The first one came on TCU's first possession near midfield. 3rd and 8, they complete a quick pass to Jeremy Payne. Long 4th and 1, I would call it 4th and 2. TCU rushes to the line, quarterback sneak, doesn't get it, turnover on downs. Houston scores on that next drive, their first points in over 130 minutes of football time. What did you see on that 4th and 2? Sonny Dykes took a little bit of responsibility for this afterwards, saying that he should have made a different call. We can parse that statement out in a second, but just first, what did you see on that play, and what did you think about it?
Yeah, I don't have a problem with the call itself, especially if you know your guys. If you know you've practiced this QB sneak, or the NFL from the Eagles calls it a tush push. If you've practiced it and you trust your center and your 2 guards to get surge, you trust the quarterback to get the QB, the center exchange, and have ball security and get what is needed, then I don't have a problem with it. I generally would reserve that kind of play, even though you're trying to tempo, you're trying to catch them off guard, you're trying to do it quickly, for when I know it's 4th and short or 3rd and short. But as you mentioned, it was a 4th and 1.5, 4th and 2 in that tweener stage. And so maybe you take a second. They rushed that play. Maybe you take a quick second between Kendall Browse and Sonny Dykes, say, where are we at really? All right, that seems like a long first down conversion. Let's get into our normal stuff, or let's go under center and still run the ball, but we don't have to take ourselves out of it with a play. That's a one-note play that if you get stuffed, there's no options. And so you wonder about the process between decision-making from a coaching level on down the line to the quarterback to the execution.
It's tough. Parsing out his statements afterwards where he said, I should have called a different play. I think people are interpreting that a couple of different ways. The first is that he should have done something like what you said. Hey, let's slow, let's figure out what actually is the right call here, and then, give that kind of guidance and direction to the OC to make the right play call. The other way people are interpreting that is Sonny in key moments is now calling plays. I tend to think it's more of the first thing personally, because Sonny's more of a CEO, let his coordinators do their thing situation. But when you hear that kind of comment from the head coach after the game, what comes to mind for you?
Yeah, I agree that from all intents and purposes as we've seen, I think he is just a CEO type. But I think when he says I should have called something different, I think he made the decision that we should go for it, but not necessarily the play call.
Yeah.
I think it was just a quick, hey, let's go get it. And then Kendall calls that, and Sonny takes the blame, as in, I should have given us more leeway in that situation. It's not like Sonny is reserving all of his schematic calls for 3rd and short, 4th and short, or whatever, or overtime, whatever. I don't think that is I think that seems a pretty silly notion. But I think he did kind of, we call it buzzing down or whatever, just like, hey, let's go get it. And maybe taking a 5-second beat, because, again, you had the entire play clock to figure that one out. And, football is everything is cascading. Everything affects another thing. Yeah, you go for it. Yeah, you don't get it. That's very bad. It's a bad look where you were. But then you flip back to the defensive side, and they just march right down and score. And, there are plenty of times in college and the pros when I was on high-flying offenses and we just didn't have our fastball that day. And what saved us plenty was the defense that understood that and figured that out and stopped the bleeding, did what they had to do. Somebody made a play, whether it was Darryl Washington and Jerry Hughes in college, or whether I was, on teams with Jason Pierre-Paul or Charles Woods, you name it. There's a level of understanding that this is a 3-phase game. This doesn't come down to, regardless of what that call was, that being the end-all be-all, especially that was the first quarter. It's the first quarter. We'll debate the merits of the saying yes or calling that particular play, but this goes to a larger, I think, point of where is the complementary football aspect of this team, and it's just you struggle to find the cohesiveness there.
You do, and in fairness, this drive was coming off of a moment where the defense got a 4th down stop of their own and turned the ball over. And so you've already started to capture some of that early momentum. There's nothing wrong. And this gets to a larger trend, I think, with the offense that we've seen since the start of last year, is that it seems like pace is always the priority. Yeah. When there should be moments where you do take a beat, really evaluate what the best play call is, and then get the right personnel out, go and execute. Instead of, hey, let's rush up to the line, get this play, keep the defense off our heels. I think some of the execution issues we've seen from this offense, and we can talk about that a little bit later, comes down to how the coaching staff is prioritizing what they want to do offensively. Whether it's get up to the line quickly and throw it, what kind of personnel they've got, all that kind of stuff. The second play, though, that I want to talk about, Marshall, second quarter, Houston's got the ball, second and 6. TCU has just scored. Missed the extra point, but they did score a touchdown. It's 17-6 at this point. You feel like TCU's starting to get their sea legs, maybe start to get a little bit going here. And then Zion Chris snaps off a 71-yard touchdown run. And not great. I included a screenshot in our show notes for you there. 5 in the box, 3 down linemen, and Cooper McDonald on the edge. You've got a linebacker lined up in the middle there, 2 other linebackers on each hash, safeties outside of each hash. For those of us that saw this play and thought, maybe if you're a defense that's giving up a lot of running plays lately, you should have more guys closer to the line of scrimmage. Just what are you seeing on this play pre-snap, and what do you recall from it as it was happening?
Yeah, I mean, I watched the replay multiple times after seeing it live, and this comes back to just situational awareness. So TCU was in cover 2. They are 2 high safeties, but this is also a 2-minute drill situation for Houston. And again, Zion Chris is not an air it out quarterback. So yes, make the cover 2 call. I'm not mad at that, especially on second down. But then understand, what is this guy good at? What is his best attribute? And I believe it is his legs. And so from an awareness standpoint, if I'm the entire D-line, if I'm the middle linebacker, even if I'm these overhang safeties in the slot, I'm saying we're watching his eyes. We're seeing his first read. If it's not there, he's looking, his head's going down and he's running. Now, this is a called lead quarterback draw. Lead draw meaning the running back who normally gets the ball is a leading blocker for the QB. So there are 6 blockers for 5 TCU guys. And still, my antennas as a defensive player are up for something happening with this guy's legs. I'm not worried about a deep post. He hasn't shown me anything this game for me to be threatened by him, throwing complicated flood concepts or, doing a whole lot with his second and third reads. And so if you watch the play out, he runs down the middle untouched. He runs a straight line. He runs a conditioning gasser from after the snap. And so he's untouched. And if I'm a defensive lineman, there's no shed there. There's no awareness of where he might be. Even if I forego the original pass rush surge as a defensive lineman, I have to contain this guy. The worst thing that we could do is allow him to just be untouched like this. And so multiple failures, but just, again, situational awareness. I said this on the broadcast. My time with New England emphasized from Bill Belichick to first win, you must keep yourself from losing. And little things like being aware of the moment and what that moment's called for comes from film study. My film study says Zion Chris is not their primary, the guy that they want in a 2-minute before half or go win situation. That's not what he's going to do with his arm. All right, what's he going to do? Most likely his legs, either with a scramble or this called draw. So multiple failures. It's just one of those things that it's an unforced error because, you just scored. You have a chance with multiple timeouts to get the ball back and go score again. Yeah. And this is a game again. So
just a lack of preparation or a lack of execution, lack of awareness. You got to check all of these boxes here. Really frustrating thing to see. And then we see it again later in the football game. Fourth quarter, TCU has gotten to within a possession. 30-yard touchdown pass from Josh Hoover to Jack Besh with 9:34 left in the game. 27-19 after the extra point. TCU did some things in the third quarter to try and chase points a little too early, in my opinion. After they missed the extra point, they go for 2 on their next touchdown. Don't get it. All of a sudden, you're down 12. Some interesting challenges there, some questionable decision-making there, but that's, I think, more hindsight than really anything else. Sure. At this point in the game, you get the touchdown, you get the extra point, you're down 8 with about 9.5 minutes left in the football game. Again, situational awareness. Houston is going to run this football. They're going to try and kill as much clock as they possibly can. They're protecting a lead late for like the first time all year. They're going to go to their bread and butter. It has not been a difficult concept on offense for them all night. You know what they're going to do. They proceed to burn 8 minutes off of the clock almost before they kick a field goal. And one key moment in that, 3:45 left, ball on the TCU 25, 3rd and 9. Donovan Smith is in the game now. Another mobile guy who you don't trust his arm. He was only 2 for 2 on the night passing for 13 yards, right? You know what he's in the game to do. He's in the game to run probably a quarterback draw, have that extra lead blocker at running back, and see if he can't get them either a better field goal spot or, God forbid, a first down. TCU, again, this 6 in the box. Maybe 5.5 because of how far the end is off of the tackle on this play. Nana Osafo-Mensah is a good 1.5 yards away, I think, from that left tackle at this point. I know there's some benefits to that about reading blocking. Like I understand there's some benefits to that as well. But Donovan Smith, 11-yard rush, first down. Houston kills. Let's see. They kill another 2 minutes off before they kick the field goal after this play. And so TCU gets the ball back with less than 2 minutes remaining in the game, now down 11. And just what did you see on that play? Everybody in the press box I know was saying QB draw. QB. Jeremy Clark looked at me and says, they're going to run it with Donovan Smith right here. Steven Johnson on his other side was like, oh, yeah, it's QB draw. Like everybody in the press box knew what was coming. And TCU, afterwards, Sonny Dykes said, we were screaming at the players that it was going to be a draw. Mm-hmm. So it seems like even the coaching staff, once they saw the formation, spread them out and run it. Just what did you see on this play, and how would you evaluate TCU's execution here?
Yeah, I mean, just to set the scene, as you just did, I said it on air. They were, to use a parlance from soccer, they were parking the bus. The entire fourth quarter, they were in no hurry to do anything, and they were not going to throw unless they had to, absolutely. And in this moment, 3rd and long, yeah, Donovan Smith's a better passer, but as you stated, and as all those guys in the press box stated, this was just a run-the-ball situation. At worst, we burn another 30, 40 seconds. We get a field goal opportunity. We try to go up 2 possessions, and TCU's shown us nothing that they can overcome that. And so, so now we go to the execution. As you mentioned, 6 guys in the box. Apparently the coaches were screaming, draw, draw, draw. And what happens is a blitz is called. And so I don't know if I blame the players as much. I still say, similarly to the QB trial before, you have to have awareness of how you're rushing up the field, and especially against a mobile quarterback. You can't – they call – I mean, when you watch NFL Sundays and there's Lamar Jackson and even Pat Mahomes, they call it rushing lanes, rush lane integrity, and which just means – you have to have awareness of what side of the lineman you're rushing on as a defensive lineman and how you are keeping the quarterback in the pocket, contained in his area, where he has to, if it's a pass play, he has to use his arm to get out of it, or it's a sack. Nothing else is okay. And so, yes, they're blitzing. So I give the defensive line a little credit for that. We talked about it off air. Nnamdi Obiozor is coming on a middle dog cross, which means he's the second linebacker blitzing and crossing around the original linebacker, who I believe is Johnny Hodges. And he has a shot. He has Donovan Smith dead to rights for, if not a sack, a stop at the line of scrimmage. And he, again, with having, you assume, heard QB draw from the sideline, having the awareness of what the situation is calling for, is just like a bat out of hell. I love his athleticism. I love his want to and his will. He's been one of my favorite players to watch. Overruns the QB completely. Slips, falls. It looks like a NFL Follies tape. I mean, he's not even in position to get a piece of him. And you're just like, what else do you think was going to happen there if you're a player? And so you wonder, what of that is innate? Does he have the awareness of, just natural football knowledge? Was he just so in tune to doing his job as a blitzer that he kind of loses track of the QB? Again, it's just from head to toe. These are things that are not complicated. These are things that the best teams in the country are doing on a regular basis. They're making teams beat them in other more complicated ways. They're not losing on basic situational things like this. And so this, again, all but salts the game away. This was such a pivotal miss right here. And you see it on Sonny's face, just the frustration where you hear him say, and it sounds crazy to hear, I don't know what's going on. We're coaching, it's just they're not executing, or vice versa. We got to coach them better. I can see the exasperation on him, because if indeed they were screaming draw, there's not an excuse for all 6 guys to just have blinders on right now and for them to convert. There's just not an excuse.
There really isn't. And this gets into kind of our next section of this show. So just a quick reset. Frogs Insider Podcast presented by the Flying T Club, part of the Dave Campbell Texas Football Republic of Football Network. You can go to flyingtclub.com to see how you can get involved with TCU's NIL institution. You can find the Republic of Football Network by searching Republic of Football wherever you get your podcasts. All right, Marshall, big picture, because obviously this is a bad loss. Houston's one of the worst teams in the Big 12. You can't afford to lose this football game going into the bye week. You'd rather be 4-2 after the struggles you've had, still setting yourself up to compete in a wide open Big 12 to see yourself in Arlington in December. But beyond the issues that we saw in this football game, there are some persistent issues that we've seen, even going back to the 2022 year, that I think were masked by some veteran NFL caliber football players playing for the Horned Frogs. Since 2023, though, this football team is now 8-10, 5-7 last year, 3-3 so far this year, under 500 since appearing in the national championship game. They are 4-8 in conference play in that time span, including losses now to Houston, UCF. They lost 3 Big 12 home games last season. They are 5-5 at the Carter since the start of 2023, and 2 of those 5 wins are their FCS wins. There are a lot of things, just from an inefficient offense to an abysmal defense, not doing the little things right. What, in your mind, has been the challenge for TCU going back to the start of last season? Like, there are so many things that we could kind of go on a tangent and talk about here, but what do you kind of put your finger on as some of the key issues facing TCU football as a program right now?
Yeah, I hate to say it, because it speaks, and as soon as you hear it, it speaks to a lot of things that worry you. And to me, it's just discipline, and on a discipline on a macro level, where, until this week, TCU was 120th in penalties. Again, 15 missed tackles, plenty of, just Josh Hoover threw multiple quick passes where the receivers looked like they didn't expect anything to be happening. The ball wasn't coming. Communication issues on the back end. There's just a weird level of you want to trust that your players can just go play football, and you, as a coach, you put them in the best position to go do that and play fast and not to overthink. But TCU doesn't appear to be playing fast, playing confidently, or playing doing things in a smart way. And so as a player, I want to take onus as a player always and be like, it's me first. What can I do better? But it seems like a lot of guys are just running around getting cardio. And that just, I don't know where that stems from exactly, but that's what it appears to be. And, we can get into, the lack of adaptation from multiple teams now utilizing that substitution rule. I think you mentioned that. Yeah. We can go in deep in that, because that was especially frustrating, because it's less to do with the rule being flawed. The rules are always flawed. You same with taxes. You just take the loopholes that are there. It's not our job as citizens to change the tax code. You do what is there. If that substitution rule is being called the way it is, and after the first time Houston decides they're going to do it and bleed you out and piss Sonny off, rightfully so, then you say, all right, we're getting in 11, 12. You tell everybody in that group, hey, you're staying in this entire drive until we bleed them out. We do something where they don't get to substitute, or if they want to try to pull the stuff, the ref has no choice but to let us snap the ball. We get a procedure penalty. We get a neutral zone infraction. We throw deep. All these things can stem from that. But who has prepared the players mentally to take advantage of that moment? Who has prepared the coaches to take advantage of mismatches when you have a new quarterback who's starting for Houston, but after the first 4 passes, where 2 of them are swing screens and 2 of them are quick outs or quick curls, you're like, you look at this guy's head after the snap and you say, oh, he's staring number 1 receiver down his first read, and he has no other option.
Yeah.
After that, what do you do? Because no one has all the answers in the first quarter. That's fine. But the best teams go to the sideline. They use their chalkboard, and now they've got the surfaces, and you adjust. And the 2022 team seemingly adjusted very well. And I wonder how much of that was the veteran leaders just, taking it amongst themselves. We weren't in the locker room. We'll never know. But things changed. Yeah, they won a lot of close games. They got down early, but they made obvious adjustments in midstream to correct things. And that the feel for that seems to have dissolved. And I don't know if that's like an institutional knowledge when guys graduate and leave, or with new coaches coming in and out. That happens everywhere. No one has this kind of fall off precipitously with coaches and players leaving like I feel like TCU has had. So I feel like I'm meandering, but there's just you look at the whole picture and you're like, there's so many things, little bitty things that add up to a lot that are going wrong. And it goes back to like, where is the discipline to just, Willie Fritz said before Houston, we're going to simplify the game plan.
Yep.
I'm okay with that because all he did was take less off the players' shoulders and let them just go do what they do. And if it's not enough schematically, fine, but they're playing fast. They're doing what you need to do. Do we need to just simplify everything and just see who wants to go play man up, straight up, and then we add stuff back in after that? So I'm kind of at a loss. It feels like I'm just going in circles trying to find an answer, but I'm as frustrated and confused as it seems Sonny is.
Look, I 2 things off of that because I think you're hitting the nail on multiple heads here. We have heard a lot in post-game press conferences over the past year and a half. Sonny Dykes sitting down, taking responsibility, saying he is accountable for the issues that we're seeing, talking in hindsight about, I should have done this adjustment. I should have made this happen. We should, if I had it over again, I would have made this call, going all the way back to the Big 12 championship game in 2022 when he didn't give Max Duggan a QB sneak. You and I were sitting there talking about it in the press box before we got down to talk to Sonny, and he says, if I had that play over, I would do it differently. He's been saying stuff like that in post-game losses pretty consistently since he's been on TCU's payroll. The question is how does he convert that hindsight knowledge to in-game adjustments and midweek game planning? Because you talked about the sub stuff. He mentioned in post-game after Houston, I should have said we're not going to sub anymore. Why didn't you? Why didn't you say that? Why didn't you turn to Kendall Browse and say no more subs? Run. This is the guy. This is the unit right here. When we see TCU being 0-3 when they miss double-digit tackles so far this year, we got to tackle better. What are you doing in the midweek to make sure that on Saturday you tackle better? Right? Mm-hmm. There are so many times you can spend capital in a press conference saying, yes, I messed up. Yes, I messed up. Yes, I messed up. When you get to a point where it's time to stop messing up. It's time to make the adjustments that you need to make. And if you don't feel like you can communicate that appropriately to your assistant coaches, or if you don't feel your assistant coaches are communicating that and teaching that in the way you need it done to the players, or if both of those things are happening the right way, I have some questions about that. Why aren't the players executing, and are there guys on the roster that can? Because I think what I'm hearing from TCU's fan base and from folks around the program now is that we're the runway that we saw Sonny Dykes earn for himself after the 2022 season. He's cut off massive chunks, massive lengths of that runway at this point. It is shorter than I thought it would be this time a month ago. And some big adjustments have to be made. And we have to stop hearing accountability lectures from Sonny Dykes in postgame and start seeing adjustments and the impact of midweek practices on Saturday afternoons. Or I'm working on a piece for later this week, a little tease for hornfrogblitz.com, that really asks the question, is TCU football at a crossroads or at an impasse? Because those two things are very different. One has feasible solutions that you can institute, and you take one path on a crossroads, and it's solution based, and you fix things and you move forward. You go the other way and you don't. If you're at an impasse, there is no way around that. And so, what needs to happen if that's actually the case right now for TCU football? This is not a point that I thought we would be at this point in Sonny Dykes' tenure. This is not a point I thought we'd be at 3-3 midway through this season. But I mean, there's some really good articles out there this week where folks are critiquing TCU football to this point. And one of them, I dropped a link in here, Marshall. Sam Kahn Jr., known as the Techspert for The Athletic and the New York Times. Here are 4 data points about the defense that I'm going to read to you, and I'd just like for you to kind of reflect on these with me for a moment. Because this is a trend of Sonny Dykes' coached teams from a defensive standpoint. Oh, excuse me. Since the start of 2023, TCU has allowed 32.1 points per game to FBS opponents, which ranks 111th nationally. The 43.1% third down conversion rate TCU allows to FBS opponents is 112th in that same time span. The defense is 407.8 yards per game allowed to FBS foes since the start of 2023 is 92nd nationally. Congratulations, you've broken into the top 100. And according to Pro Football Focus, the Horned Frogs have pressured opposing quarterbacks less than 28% of the time in the last 16 games against FBS competition, which ranks 110th. We saw bad defenses for Sonny Dykes at Louisiana Tech. We saw bad defenses for Sonny Dykes at Cal. We saw bad defenses for Sonny Dykes at SMU. And now we're seeing bad defenses for Sonny Dykes at TCU. What has to happen if you're an offensive-minded head coach and you've played for a bunch of defensive-minded head coaches and offensive-minded head coaches in your career, both at TCU and in the NFL, when you have a coach who is so oriented towards one side of the football, where have you seen situations where the other side of the football is still having success?
Yeah, I don't even know what you do, especially not at this point in the season, but you brought in a defensive coordinator who had success as a head coach and a coordinator before that. And to me, ultimately it comes down to, on defense, what do you do well and what do you hang your hat on? And so I had heard about Andy Avalos' defense and some of the Boise film that I saw, but to this point, I still don't know what we are supposed to be known for. What is in their meetings, when he was installing, when he got introduced through training camp, what is the emphasis? Is it, hey, we're going to be a fast defense? TCU, notably under Gary Patterson, was always smaller. The way that he recruited, the way that he trained guys, he moved safeties to linebackers and linebackers to defensive ends to D tackles. He would rather speed and aggression than size. Okay, fine. And then guess what? He played into that, and that worked. That doesn't mean that's what you have to do, but what is your thing that you feel like you have an advantage over the next team every single week? And again, from TCU's standpoint, we can't name it. If it's not obvious at this point, 6 games in, that's not good. We don't have, and I don't know if he said it. I've missed all the press conferences, but I don't know if Avalos and Sonny has said what this defense is supposed to be. So if we don't know, there's a chance that they don't know, and if they don't know, there's a definite possibility that the players don't know. And when you show up as a defensive player, what am I hanging my hat on? Yeah. And identity is half the battle, because then there's less pressure to then go be everything to everyone. All right, you're not going to run on us. Okay, fine. You're not going to run on us. That means we need to recruit better coverage, man, corners. We need to recruit rangy safeties. Okay, cool. All right, you're not going to pass on us. You're not going to just sling the thing around. All right, we need to recruit thicker defensive tackles. bit more run supporting defense. It's a balance. Things always have a yin and a yang, but when even in the first year of the defense, we don't know what TCU is supposed to be, other than right now pretty putrid. And I don't think putrid is a level of defense. And I want to be fair to the guys in the locker room, because I was that guy, and I imagine they're more pissed off than any fan could ever be.
Oh, sure, yeah.
And so if I'm them, I would also want to know, like, what are we trying to be? What do we want to be? And how do we get there? Because the harder part now is, what is the path forward in a tangible, operable way?
Yeah. Because
I'm willing to work all hours of the night to fix it and figure it out, because I care enough. And I imagine a lot of guys in the locker room care enough. I know the Bud Clarks of the world, Dave Kamaras, Lamarion James, and the guys that transfer, Johnny Hodge. I know they care. I know they want to be good, but they seem befuddled, and I have empathy for them, because that's not where you want to be. They feel some of them who might not go on to play more, these are the last moments of their careers, and they want to be playing better. They want to be given more opportunity. And I'm going to close with this later, but I'm going to say it now too. Again, none of the games that they've played so far this season, and none of the games that they have yet to play, are unwinnable.
Yeah.
This is a schedule the way it shook out, and a team that is fully capable of beating everybody on their schedule. And that is ultimately extra disappointing. And to me, it's just, I wonder where their heads are at from a top-down coaching level of, do we have to put our ego to the side? Are there things that are getting in the way that are not all about football, that are not truly all about the product on the field? That's not for us to know. I ask around all the time, but that's not for us to know technically. But again, all we have to go on is what we see on the field, and it's not too great.
Yeah. Look, I'll say this. We don't typically get to talk to coordinators in the middle of the season at TCU. I know that's not the case in the NFL. I know that's not the case in other schools at the collegiate level, but we don't talk to coordinators in the middle of the season typically. When we got to talk to Andy Avalos prior to the year, he talked about two things being a point of emphasis for his defense, and I'm not making this up, Marshall. Tackling and stopping the run were the things that he identified as the priorities for this defense. So
wow.
I don't know.
Wow.
I don't know what the disconnect is there. I don't know, and this is I was at fall camp. I was there for every media availability. I watched him work with these guys on form, on technique. He's a very hands-on football coach. I thought moving him to the sideline at halftime of the Kansas game was a very smart move.
Yes,
Sonny Dykes, because we saw a defense that played more inspired and more, like you were talking about earlier, gap sound football in that second half against Kansas than we had seen yet to this point in the season. Total regression on Friday night against Houston in all of the worst possible ways. I don't know what the solution is, like you do, in the middle of the season, but more existentially, Sonny Dykes has to find one on that side of the football. Offensively, as we kind of keep going here, I understand that depending on who you are as a TCU fan, there were varying levels of frustration with hiring Kendall Briles. A lot of that had to do with his last name. A lot of that has to do with him being on staff during one of the darkest times in college football from a program failure perspective, because the Baylor situation was a total programmatic failure, an institutional failure. But the reality is that Sonny Dykes spent a lot of goodwill and a lot of social capital making that happen. And when you do things like that, there are definitely opportunities for it to work out. I think if you make a controversial hire, that hire comes in, does everything the right way, gets the guys ready every week, has shown that there's been progress from a personal perspective, and you're having success on the football field, I don't think there's any reason to continue critiquing hires that are made like that. That's my personal opinion. But when you spend a lot of social capital and a lot of goodwill off of a national championship run, and then you get an offense that is lackluster, inefficient, one-sided, with a lot of raw data kind of masking some significant issues. I think what we're starting to see from the TCU fan base, at least what I've been seeing in my mentions for the last couple of weeks, if not longer, is a real, genuine, and growing sense of frustration with who Sonny Dykes has hired from a coordinator perspective. And that's not just like Kendall Briles specific. That is, he hired a defensive coordinator that he had to fire after 2 years. He's on offensive coordinator number 2 already. The new defensive coordinator that he brought in is not having success through the first 6 games of his career. What is that? Is there a larger commentary here about Sonny Dykes as the CEO head coach delegating to coordinators? Is he not identifying coaching talent? Like, what's
by the way?
What I mean.
Oh, by the way, he brought in Dana Holgerson and Todd Graham to consult.
Yeah.
What do they do? What are they adding to this program from an offensive scheming for the Todd Graham? If people don't know, when programs bring in consultants, they used to be head coaches with success. They do that to basically self-scout and kind of find blind spots. And so Todd Graham, who's a defensive coach, helps the supposed offensive coordinator, not supposed, the actual offensive coordinator, Kendall Briles, in theory. He helps them refine his own game plan and the things that are working week to week. And on opposite end, Dane Holstein helps Andy Avalos. And that's usually how things go. And so those guys, love them or hate them, have had a lot of success. And there's a lot of knowledge that they have, both from their experience and then from their coaching experience against coaches that are currently head coaches that TCU is facing. So there's a ton of knowledge there. There's a ton of institutional knowledge. And you wonder how much value they're bringing. I believe it's plenty. Is that knowledge getting to the right place? Is it being used in the right way? Because what good is that if there's a filter that doesn't then trickle it down to other staff and other players? All that knowledge is just, it's fugazi. It's just there. And so that's one thing. And then I won't get as much into, because you guys have talked about that a lot, and that's less of my area as a former player, to critiquing these hires, because ultimately, no matter what the viewer feels about Kendall Briles, this offense is a top quarter offense. Mm-hmm. This offense is averaging 38 points a game. That wins most of the time. And we talked about early in the pod, sometimes that contextually doesn't matter as much, the raw stats, the raw data, but those are real numbers too. Even with the lack of the run game. And so there's enough there right now to win. So imagine we're still having this conversation about Andy Avalos and Kendall Briles, but TCU is undefeated, because that very well should have been the case. There's nothing to tell me that TCU shouldn't have been undefeated. Sure, And so with these same numbers on offense, at least, because the conversation different? I think the conversation is different from an execution standpoint, from the discipline stuff, because a lot of that was just, from the block, from the returns against SMU and from just breakdowns in coverage and QBs who are mobile running at will. And that's real. But again, I'll reiterate so people don't just walk into traffic. This is a team that can win and should be winning. And that should make things a little bit extra disappointing because it's there. But the mystery of it all is finding out what's the missing piece.
Mm-hmm. It is. What is the missing piece? This is just one more little note. This was sent to me a couple weeks ago by a friend of mine who's in the football analytics world. This was after the UCF game, so these numbers are a little bit outdated. But we've seen a significant kind of deterioration along the offensive line over the last several years. Some of that is due to losing guys like Brandon Coleman, who is currently having a wonderful amount of success with the Commanders, losing Steve Avila, who's, both of those guys that I just mentioned were day one NFL starters, right?
Yep.
Very talented guys. Not to mention losing Alana Lee, Wes Harris, Andrew Coker off that 22 roster. But in 2022, TCU was 27th in pass blocking in the country and 40th in run blocking. Top 40 in both. Excellent. 2023, they were 55th in pass blocking, 105th in run blocking. We saw some of those struggles. Imani Bailey, I don't think gets enough credit for reaching the 1,200-yard rushing mark last season when, with an offensive line that was run blocking outside of the top 100 in FBS. 2024, this is through the UCF game. I don't have updated numbers. 94th in pass block, 83rd in run block. Both outside the top 80. That's below the P4 level. There aren't that many P4 teams. So you're talking about a G5 grade essentially from this offensive line in both areas so far in 2024. What do you think? And this kind of goes back to a larger issue with how do you bring talent in to a program? How do you develop talent in your program? Because I think Sonny Dykes has accumulated a good number of offensive linemen, a good number of defensive linemen on the other side of the football. But it's so challenging when in 2023 you're replacing 4 starters off the offensive line, and in 2024 you're replacing 4 starters off the offensive line. You're not replacing them generally with guys who have been in the program, understand the scheme, have worked with coaches, but you're portaling a lot of these guys. Right? Yep. James Brockermeyer wasn't here this time last year. Colton Deary was, but he was playing a different position. Carson Bruno wasn't here this time last year. Bless Harris wasn't here this time last year. Ben Taylor Whitfield and Mike Nichols both were, but they were in reserve roles.
Yeah.
And so you're talking about, of those top 6 offensive linemen, 4 weren't even handed a playbook until February.
Right.
A lot of these issues, I think, when you're talking about a program like TCU, which has access to an extraordinary amount of talent, the university is fully invested in football. That's not the issue. Where do you see some of the deficiencies from an execution standpoint? Is it because they haven't been around long enough to know each other well, to trust each other? Should we be looking forward to 2025 when there are some of these sophomores that I think are going to start to break into the starting 5 for this offensive line next year? When you see numbers like that taking that kind of precipitous of a fall off, what is that signaling to you?
Yeah, it's a lot of things, and definitely it pains me as an offensive lineman and a guy who cares a lot about this position, and specifically at TCU. Like, we have such a rich history in the offensive line room. And I like Coach Ricker a lot. I've met him, gotten to talk to him a little bit. I think he possesses the attitude, and a lot of times the player's attitude is reflective of the coach that's coaching them, and I like his approach. But yeah, it is difficult to build a cohesive offensive line unit with collective grit and a collective, intelligence about what it takes to win with this many moving pieces. And so, to a certain degree, there's a whole new landscape of how do you cultivate talent from a high school level while also trying to not take steps backward with graduating seniors through the portal. And so it's a dance that I don't know if anyone's really gotten perfect. I mean, the entire country has talked about Florida State, but all we heard was that they crushed it in the portal, and they're a team that can't buy a win right now, and might end up with 1 or 2 wins on the entire season. Not to compare us to them, but and then you focus in on the film, and that's ultimately, I think, the fairest thing is to focus on what we see on Saturdays, and this week Friday, is a collective unit that just is nasty. That even with lack of talent, they make every defensive group's life a living hell. And what I've seen is TCU play teams that do that to us and us not necessarily do that to them. I hate to even admit it, SMU's line tossed TCU around for 48 minutes. And it's, again, offensive line play, to be successful does not have to be pretty. I would argue that when it is less pretty, it is more successful in a sense of scrappiness, finishing blocks. There's a thing called strain, which for the folks at home, when you engage in a run or pass block as an offensive lineman, use your hands, you get them inside, you keep your elbows tight, you're corking down your grip on a guy to either drive him backwards or to keep him away from your quarterback. Originally, that lasts for 2 to 3 seconds because that's how long most run plays take. That's how long most pass plays take. But the elite teams, the teams that impose their will, strain beyond that. 4 seconds, 5 seconds, 6 seconds. And that has a cumulative effect, both physically and mentally, on the opposing group. When you are an offensive line that is known to push to they call it the echo of the whistle in the run game, and you see your linemen flipping over downfield and tumbling and getting into it with other D linemen, you can chuckle to yourself because like, oh, we're getting after folks. That translates. It might not look like you think it's supposed to look in quarter 1, but in quarter 4, that translates. That leads to explosive Cam Cook runs. That leads to Josh Hoover with comfort in the pocket to find Savion and Jack Besh. That stuff has a cumulative effect when all 5 guys are locked in doing that, regardless of their skill or talent. That is something that has to translate every day in practice, every game, at home and away, no matter who comes in on the transfer portal, who leaves, who you sign out of high school. And so it's a culture thing. It's an attitude thing, and that's cultivated over time. It does take time, but it takes buy-in. And maybe they're gelling slower than we like, maybe. But maybe there's just we've lost a little bit of that commitment to cultivating that kind of culture within the offensive line group, because that translates to me directly to wins. It is, again, messy and not pretty, and most people don't understand what they're looking at. But I can tell you, trust me, that translates directly to wins. Steve Avila, who's hurt right now, and Brandon Coleman and Andrew Coker, those guys smile big, and they're incredible ambassadors in the community, but they are absolute assholes. Can I cuss on this? Will you believe it?
Absolutely.
On the field in between the white lines. And I had a chance to speak to the team before, and I told them stories of my time. By no means was I a perfect lineman. I'm a short tackle. I've got quick feet, but I had lots of limitations. Marcus Cannon, who just got inducted in the TCU Hall of Fame, had his limitations. Jake Kirkpatrick, who won the Remington, had his limitations. But every single one of us took a pride and an emphasis in this grittiness, this finish, that even when it looked not great on film, there was an attitude that was imposed on people where guys just started making business decisions, and that translated to our running backs having success, and I believe the rest of the team having success.
I mean, I can't say anything better about the offensive line than what you just did, so I'm gonna keep on to our last point, because I agree with you, and I will say this: you do, when you see a good offensive line getting after it, you know it when you see it. It might not always look the same way, but you know it when you see it. And I don't think we've seen it from TCU in a couple of years now, and it is pretty disappointing. But the question that has to be asked to kind of cap all of this off, Marshall, where does TCU go from here? Because we know that there is a pride and a standard with this program that players like you built over the last 25 years. We know that there is a pride and a standard that the fan base holds this program to, and we've seen it over the last, what is it now, 18 football games, kind of miss the mark. And not to get too existential here, but when you look at the changing landscape of college football, when you look at all of the realignment challenges, when you look at all of the schools grappling for position, for inclusion, the threat of extinction is real, I think, when you're talking about being left out of the cold of whatever the next iteration of college football looks like, whether that's in 2, 5, 10 years, whatever. This is not the time to be missing the mark on what the standard should be for TCU football. So where does TCU football go from here?
Yeah, I think it's, in the simplest form I can put it, it's just a level of like honest and no punches pulled accountability from the top down. I mean, you would like to think that would have happened so far. Maybe some people need a certain shock of cold water to then get the picture. But from Sonny to his coordinators, emphasizing the things that were simple things that were being done poorly, and then on down the hill to position coaches, and then from like the honest communication where we don't have time to pussyfoot around and be passive aggressive and not be direct and worry about people's feelings and not be honest about what we're seeing, because if it continues, then you have to wonder if they're okay with that level of production. They can say all they want, but until if my house is on fire and I'm trying to get you out with me, I'm not going to be like, hey, man, the house is on fire. I'm going to be like, hey, Jamie, MFer, the house is, we got to go now. Yeah. And that's a sense of urgency that has to translate in how I carry myself. And protecting people's feelings, I get that they're always recruiting and trying to keep guys in program. That's a whole new dynamic that I was not a part of. But that shouldn't get in the way of being honest with people. Because I think even if a player leaves, TCU wasn't for him, and that's fine. But at least he left with an honest idea of what was expected of him and what his actual performance was. And if we're missing that, then we're missing the mark, because football is not a game for people with a lot of soft sensitivities about their performance. I was my harshest critic. I wanted direct feedback, and I guarantee you Coach P gave it. But maybe my offensive line coach, Eddie Williamson, who I love dearly, he gave it to me, and I learned to appreciate that, because I got to get it. I got to then go back in the lab and get better faster. I got to iterate faster and improve myself, the guys around me, improve my group, improve the offense, and then thus improve the team faster. Not because people were pulling punches, because they told me what was really the deal. And then I could, as a leader, once I became a senior, I then did that because there was love there, and there was an understanding that I'm also my harshest critic. I'm not doing this as a perfect entity. And so a program-wide, we have to sit in the $3 million team meeting room and just have a come-to-Jesus meeting about what this is. I don't know, maybe. How you do it is less important than what you're doing. And I think they've got to have some honest communication.
I fully agree. And look, as you're talking about receiving direct feedback, being your harshest critic, and iterating faster so that you can improve faster, part of me says, is that harder to do now because of the availability of the transfer portal? And so, one side of the coin. The other side of the coin is, are you recruiting young men who are willing to receive that kind of feedback and work on themselves, rather than say, oh, this guy's getting on my ass, I'm going to hit the portal and go somewhere else?
For sure.
It's a double-edged sword, right? You got to be recruiting talented guys who can eat it when they beef it, right? Because guys beef it all the time. That's a sports-wide thing. Failure is not if, it's when. All right, I'm going to end the show tonight with a couple of words from Stephen Johnson of the Fort Worth Star-Telegram, because he wrote an article this weekend that I thought was just fantastic. I think he got directly to the point, and he's a fantastic writer. TCU fans, I hope TCU fans know how lucky they are to have Stephen Johnson and Jeremy Clark on the beat at the same time, because both guys do a fantastic job. Having people in the space like you, Marshall, taking time out of your busy schedule to come and comment on the program. TCU fans are incredibly lucky with what they've got right now. But these are words from Stephen Johnson over the weekend. The most important commodity in college athletics is hope. Hope that one day you can see your program break through for a playoff berth, or maybe even a national title in the right year. As long as you can sell that, fans will endure a lot. But when things begin to feel hopeless, that's when you know change is on the horizon. TCU isn't at that stage yet, but with a backloaded schedule that has games against Utah, Arizona, Oklahoma State, and Texas Tech, the program could reach that point quickly. The only person that can turn this around is Sonny Dykes. And from what we've seen so far this year, it might be a job that's too big for him. I'm not going to ask you to comment on that, because I know you don't want to talk about coaching changes and decisions and that kind of thing, but those are just some really poignant words, I think, from Stephen Johnson about where the program is at this moment in time. And I fully agree. Hard conversations have to happen. Whatever the result of those hard conversations are, I think TCU will be better for it. But they have to happen. Marshall, tell us where people can find you, how they can they can keep up with you? I know you're doing a ton of stuff. Where can people find you?
Yeah, it's been a fun fall, ever changing. But right now, first you can find me on socials, X, Twitter, and Instagram at Newhouse73. I also do a bi-weekly NFL preview show on DraftKings with Trey Wingo called Pregame Power Up. It is on Monday nights preceding the Monday Night Football game at 5:20 Central. Same on Thursday, 5:20 Central, preceding the Thursday Night Football game. I'm also on the Golick and Golick Morning Show at 8 a.m. Central on DraftKings Network. DraftKings Network is a fast channel right now, but you can also find it on Roku, Samsung TV Plus, and YouTube as well, streaming. And then, I'll be in the booth, I think, at least one more time with Brian Estridge on TCU Horned Frog Network Radio. And then hopefully again with you guys. I'm accessible. Feel free to send me questions, comments, concerns. I'm here. I'm still a big fan of football and specifically of TCU. So I'm here for it all.
All right, man. You're welcome back to the show. Anytime you want to come on, all you got to do is fire a text off. Best of luck with everything you're doing. Really do appreciate you taking the time on a busy Sunday, man. That is Marshall Newhouse. I am Jamie Plunkett. It's a bye week. We'll see what we do. We'll see if we do a second show this week. Melissa's out of the country. I might scrape something together about basketball and baseball. It's okay to pivot in the middle of a bye week. But until then, that's Marshall. I'm Jamie Plunkett. We'll talk to you next time, guys. Go Frogs.